This is definitely not the video I expected to film this week. So last night, in the night, Avery's oxygen levels dropped down to levels that aren't considered normal, they're considered low. So we had to bring her to hospital. And we've been here since. Her oxygen levels continue to keep going too low every time she slept, even this morning. So she's been in for sort of monitoring and extra oxygen where she needs it. She is having another nap now, and this time her oxygen levels are actually staying at around 94, which is low for her, but it's not low in terms of normal limits, so she doesn't need the oxygen at the moment. But every time she has fallen to sleep, apart from just now, her oxygen has gone kind of into the high 80s, which is too low. So we're just erring on the side of caution. She's being monitored. I will definitely sit down and go through everything in a little bit more detail. I'm not even sure what this video is going to be. I've just picked up my camera because my husband bought a few things in for me. My camera happened to be in the bag, so I've just picked up my camera and thought I would just give you a bit of an update on what's going on. I'm very tired. I think I got a total of 4 hours interrupted sleep last night because the nurses kept coming in to check Avery, which obviously I 100% wanted them to be doing, but it did wake me up every time. So by the time we actually got to go to bed, got to go to sleep and were sort of admitted in for the night, it was 2:30, and then Avery was up at 6:30. So very, very tired. And it's kind of just a waiting game. We just have to wait and see what Avery's oxygen levels decide to do for the rest of the day to determine what we'll be doing tomorrow, I guess. As you can see, I am looking exceptionally rough today. We got home from the hospital late last night, so we are all a little bit tired. We're all obviously still poorly, but Avery's SATs looked good enough for the doctors to feel comfortable letting her go home. I think we just need to take a day or two to just rest and catch back up with things. We've already cancelled one of Avery's appointments today just because we need a day. We just need a day. So I'm gonna sit down at some point and just fill you in on everything that happened and kind of the last few days in hospital and stuff. So not sure when, but I will. For you guys, it will feel like a few seconds from now. So it has been a rough few days. We are home now. We ended up staying in the hospital for 2 nights and 2 full days. Avery is doing a whole lot better now. I mean, she's still a bit bunged up. She's still coughing and spluttering, and she still has her hearts racing a few times a day, but her oxygen levels are staying better. I wouldn't say they're brilliant. Normally her saturation levels would be 97 plus, 100 being the most, obviously 100%, but they're kind of around 94, 95, so they're still on the lower side than usual, but it's within safe and normal limits. So the hospital were happy for her to come home. So what happened was, because obviously if you guys watched my last video, then you will know that we did end up taking her to hospital because she was showing funny laboured breathing and she was spiking really high temperatures, and we just wanted to get her checked out. And she was diagnosed with a mild case of aspiration pneumonia again. So that was on the Friday, and we were home over the weekend. She was on her antibiotics. She was still poorly, but we knew that, you know, it would take a little while for those antibiotics to kick in and start doing their job. On the Monday, in the evening, just before me and my husband were going to go to sleep, I went in, I gave her her baclofen, and I put a SATS monitor on like I always do. And we got into bed and the SATS monitor started to beep and her oxygen was low. And then it picked back up, which can be normal for Avery, especially when she's poorly. It can drop and then pick back up. But then it started to settle at around 91%, and normal for a baby is 92% or above, and it stayed like that for a good 30 minutes. So at that point we called the hospital and asked them for some advice, and they said because her oxygen levels were low, then it was best to just bring her in and get her checked over. So we did. And usually what happens with Avery, if we take her in with a fever or something like that, it usually has time to settle itself down before we actually get to hospital, and we just have to explain what she's been experiencing as opposed to them actually seeing it. But they hooked her up to their SATS monitors in hospital. She fell asleep and her oxygen dropped back down to around 91%. So they said then that she was going to be staying in overnight in case she needed some oxygen through the night. So my husband went home at that point. He had to get back to the boys because once again my mum saved the day and came over to watch the boys so that we didn't need to wake them up when we went to the hospital. And I settled down in my lovely little fold out bed next to Avery, and within minutes of laying her down in the cot, her oxygen was dropping to 90, 89. So they put the oxygen mask on her then, and she pretty much had that on through most of the night. I say most of the night, by the time we actually went to sleep it was half two in the morning, and Avery woke me up at 6:30, so it was 4 hours. The next day Avery was fine when she was awake. Her oxygen was at a safe level when she was awake. The doctors did their rounds, they came round and they basically just said we just have to monitor if her oxygen drops before we can let her home, because the oxygen was in the hospital and if she needed it then really she needed to be there. So that is what we did. We settled in for a day at the hospital, and every time Avery went for a nap her oxygen would drop. So she needed the oxygen when she slept, and when she was awake she was fine. Now obviously this wasn't safe enough for her to go home, so she did need to stay in another night, so she did. That night however her oxygen stayed up at 97 plus through the entire night. So the next morning I woke up and I thought, yes, we're going to be going home this morning, it's going to be fine. And before the doctors had had a chance to do their round, Avery had fallen to sleep, she'd had a nap and her oxygen dropped again. So they basically said, we can't let you home just yet. What we really need you to do is let her have another nap so that we can see what her oxygen does before we send you home. We also did a nebulizer at the hospital to see if that would help with her oxygen levels. So this was at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I kid you not, all day we were trying to get her to go to sleep. We were trying to tire her out, we were walking her around the hospital all day long, and she would not go to sleep. She didn't actually go to sleep until about 6 o'clock in the evening, and when she did, her oxygen did stay at around 95. So that was good enough for us to be discharged. When we were discharged we were also sent home with a prophylactic antibiotic, which is an antibiotic that she will be taking 3 times a week through the winter, just to try and keep some bacterial infections away, because we know Avery is so prone to picking up viruses. Hopefully that will just help through the winter so that they don't get too bad, or she maybe even avoids some of them, because the way things are going with each illness that she's been getting over the last few months, the kind of repercussions seem to be getting worse and worse. This is the first time ever that Avery's saturation levels dropped, and I mean, I've not even explained what it is that she had. So on the Friday, the first Friday that we took her into hospital, the nurse had actually been round that morning to do a test on her secretions, and she was going to send those off to a lab to get them checked for bacterial and viral infections. And we got those results back on the Monday. We actually got them back the day we ended up going into hospital. We got the results back in the evening. Oh dear. We got the results back in the evening and we ended up back in hospital in the night, and she tested RSV positive. Now, I can't pronounce what it stands for, but I do know that it is a respiratory virus, so it affects the airways. So naturally, especially if babies are a little bit more compromised, then it stands to reason that there could be problems with the oxygen. I know there's children that have had to be intubated with RSV, so really we got away quite lucky. Avery just needed that little bit of oxygen through a mask and everything else was fine, luckily. But it does make me a little bit fearful for future illnesses. We'd better wrap this up, hadn't we, because you are getting very grumpy. You are getting very, very grumpy. Avery is doing much better. We actually not long got home from her neurology appointment. I will give you more of a bigger picture update in another video, and I'm really, really sorry that this video is so short, but I'm sure you can understand. This week has just been a bit of a whirlwind, very stressful, very emotional, and I just wanted to give you an update as to what has been going on. Oh my goodness, Avery! So we're just taking this week a bit slow, letting Avery recover. I am still full of a cold. I'm assuming it's the same thing as Avery had, but obviously I'm much stronger. My body can cope with it much better. We're just spending time as a family. This weekend is bonfire night, so we're going to do some nice things with the boys and just take it a bit easier. So the next video will be a bit longer, I promise you. Please give this video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you want to follow us along on this journey. It really helps to support me and our channel, doesn't it? Doesn't it, Puddin'? And I will see you all in a few days with another video. Bye, guys.